Hello, I'm Elise Vance, the author of the channel Borrowed Lives, and I offer you fascinating stories. Like and subscribe to my channel.
I possess a peculiar anomaly. I can hear the unspoken thoughts of anyone who doesn't hold genuine affection for me. On the eve of my wedding, I suddenly overheard my fiancé's internal monologue. If she attempts to hijack the ceremony tomorrow, sprinting away in polished dress shoes might not be the wisest choice. I maintained my composure, kept silent, and decisively boarded an international flight. The following day, that ruined ceremony became the absolute talk of the high society circles. The bride had flown across the continent, while the groom was caught red-handed trying to escape in running shoes. I have possessed this perceptual gift for as long as I can remember. I can effortlessly sense the exact thoughts of people who harbor no genuine love for me. This ability allows me to instantly discern whether someone's affection is authentic or fabricated. It has helped me quietly distance myself from opportunistic friendships and remain completely unmoved by superficial declarations of interest. Even when picking out ripe dragon fruit at a crowded street market, I can tap into the vendor's mind to pick the heaviest, sweetest batch. Because every insincere thought reaches my mind with crystalline clarity, I usually avoid direct eye contact with strangers in public to shield myself from the overwhelming cognitive noise. But when I first crossed paths with Julian, the background hum of the universe fell completely silent. All that existed was the clean, untainted rhythm of our spoken words. "Excuse me, could I buy you a coffee?" When our eyes met, I couldn't read a single thought from Julian's mind. During the entire period he pursued me, the space around my ears remained simple, pure, and quiet. I was convinced his devotion was entirely real. We fell deeply in love, moved into a shared loft, and systematically planned our future and marriage over 2 full years. During all that time, I never heard a single whisper from his inner mind. Until the night before our formal union. Julian, a 31-year-old lead architectural consultant, had been exceptionally overwhelmed recently. Coming from a prominent real estate dynasty, he had recently secured the executive vice president position at his family's architectural firm. Due to our dense wedding schedule, we had dozens of logistical matters to arrange, especially over the preceding 8 weeks. As an independent senior financial analyst myself, I respected his demanding career and gave him ample space, meaning we hadn't spent much quality time together lately. That afternoon, as we arrived at a private atelier to finalize our bespoke wedding suits, I felt a gentle warmth at the prospect of finally having an evening together. When I entered the studio on time, Julian was already there, trying on leather loafers. After wrapping up a phone call in a soft, reassuring voice, he stepped toward me. I knew how immense his workload was. Securing partners in a firm with multiple family heirs was no easy feat. We exchanged a subtle, knowing smile, but suddenly a sharp, clear voice echoed inside my mind. "Claire says she is going to interrupt the vows tomorrow. I need to make sure I wear athletic sneakers so I can slip out smoothly." "Claire? Interrupting the vows?" I froze in place, staring directly at his closed lips to confirm that this was indeed an unuttered thought. A cold, numbing sensation cascaded down my spine. I could hear his thoughts now, and the horrifying implications were glaringly obvious. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed an assistant following his prior instructions, placing a pair of sleek, white running shoes alongside his formal suit garment bag. Julian gave me a polite nod and prepared to step outside. It was our standard routine. He usually had urgent phone calls to handle. But the sentence that had just echoed inside my head was unmistakable, and my gift had never once miscalculated. My body reacted automatically. I followed him out to the curb and called out, my voice trembling slightly, "Julian." I was desperate to access more of his thoughts, to comprehend why this man who was about to become my husband had suddenly suffered such a shift in heart. My call made Julian hesitate just as he was opening the door to his town car. He turned back hastily, offering a rapid excuse before signaling the driver. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. A major developer just called with an emergency structural audit. I have to head to the downtown site immediately." He was lying. At that precise second, his true inner monologue rang out like a bell. "I can tell from Claire's tone that she's furious." If I don't go soothe her right now, she's going to make a scene at her apartment tonight. I have never been someone who passively wallows in betrayal. Instead of spiraling in self-doubt, I took direct action. I used my resources to arrange a swift, private meeting with Julian's senior executive assistant under a minor pretext, using my ability to gather the full picture. Her name was Claire. She was Julian's first real love from his university years. Claire was the unacknowledged daughter of a rival property tycoon, and because her legal status was ambiguous, Julian's conservative family had vehemently opposed their engagement. Harboring immense pride, Claire had ended things abruptly and moved overseas without leaving a trace. My sudden appearance in Julian's life and his immediate love at first sight was simply because my facial structure and demeanor bore a striking resemblance to Claire. Now that the original had returned, the substitute was no longer required. Claire's reappearance aligned perfectly with the start of Julian's overwhelming workload 2 months prior. The timeline fit with terrifying precision. I leaned back and let out a soft, humorless laugh. I had never imagined I would become the unsuspecting victim in such a cliché narrative. Claire wanted to hijack the grand wedding to publicly assert her claim over Julian while humiliating me for occupying the position meant for her. Julian, meanwhile, needed this high-stakes dramatic spectacle to prove his unyielding devotion to Claire, appease her volatile temperament, and force his traditional family to accept her. As for me and our meticulously curated ceremony, we were merely props in their theatrical romance. Honestly, the setup was so ridiculously absurd that I couldn't help but laugh out loud in my car. That night, the lights in my high-rise apartment remained on until dawn. Even though our grand wedding was scheduled for the following afternoon, I spent every minute systematically packing my life into hard-shell suitcases. 2 hours earlier, I had booked a non-refundable, first-class international ticket to Western Europe. If they wanted to play grand dramatic games, I was more than capable of directing my own twist. If Julian thought he could orchestrate a public scene with Claire, I would return the gesture by performing a total vanishing act. Fortunately, my parents had relocated overseas 3 years ago, and we had chosen not to drag dozens of distant relatives across the ocean for this primary event. We had only invited our core social circle and local associates, planning a secondary, intimate dinner abroad later. That setup made my escape remarkably seamless. I shared my plan with my closest friend, Maya. She sat on my living room floor, quietly taking packing tape from my hands with an unusually stern look on her face. Unable to read her thoughts, I paused. Maya, are you going to try and talk me out of this? Maya rolled her eyes dramatically. Are you crazy? Hell no. I brought heavy-duty duffel bags from my family's outdoor supply shop so we can move your heavy gear faster. The next afternoon, dressed in my tailored silk reception suit, I stood beside Julian at the grand conservatory entrance, greeting arriving guests. This time, Julian's internal monologue was so deafeningly loud it felt like a migraine behind my eyes. Is Claire in position yet? I can finally be with her openly. It's been 4 long years. For years of waiting. She's finally going to take her rightful place. After this interruption, Claire will finally see that my heart never truly belonged to anyone else. I couldn't suppress a cold shudder, wincing slightly as I looked at him. Julian, remaining outwardly attentive, wrapped an arm around my waist with his usual gentle demeanor. You look pale, love. Why don't you head back to the private suite and rest for half an hour? I can handle the remaining guests out here, and you can make your entry when the main doors open. That sounds like a wonderful idea, I replied smoothly. I needed a clean excuse to slip away anyway. But as I turned toward the corridor to change into travel clothing, I ran directly into Claire near the VIP lounge. Thanks to our similar features and my gift, I recognized her instantly. I caught Maya's arm just as she was preparing to charge forward in her floor-length bridesmaid gown. Pretending to be completely clueless, I offered a warm, polite smile. You must be one of Julian's former university colleagues. Please, head right in. The main vows begin in under an hour. Claire's artificial smile froze, visibly irritated by my casual authority. Her tone was sharp and coated in mock sympathy. Miss Vance, I am so terribly sorry. It seems we selected remarkably similar designer gowns today. If someone didn't know better, They might confuse me for the bride. Her arrogant inner monologue projected loud and clear simultaneously. Enjoy your little moment while it lasts. In less than an hour, your groom will walk out of this hall holding my hand. Let's see if you can keep that smug smile when you're left standing alone. I maintained my composure, offering a slight, indifferent nod, and signaled a passing coordinator to usher her toward the front rows. What a naive amateur, I thought. She thinks she's orchestrating a masterpiece, yet she doesn't even realize the main target has already checked out. As we passed into the service hallway, Maya leaned in, whispering harshly, "Did you see the nerve on her?" I wanted to rip that veil right off her head. "Let her have her spotlight," I murmured back. "She thinks I'm about to become the tragedy of the evening." She and Julian built this entire stunt to force his family's hand at my expense. The international airport was barely 20 minutes from the estate venue. By the time the formal procession was scheduled to begin, I was sitting comfortably in the terminal lounge, watching the clock while sipping espresso. Buzz, buzz, buzz. My phone lit up repeatedly as Maya began spamming our private chat with live updates and short video clips. "Maya, it's starting. They're actually doing it." It's so painfully melodramatic I can barely keep a straight face. According to the official program, after Julian took his place at the altar and the officiant delivered a polished speech about enduring devotion, the bride was supposed to make her entrance down the central aisle. That was the exact moment Claire chose to execute her grand disruption. Dressed in a gown that mirrored mine almost identically, Claire marched down the aisle, stepped onto the floral platform, and took the microphone directly from the stunned officiant. As confused murmurs rippled through the rows of high society guests, she launched into a passionate, dramatic declaration of their history. "Julian, will you walk away from all of this and choose us?" The crowd gasped. Stealing a groom off the altar on his wedding day was an unprecedented scandal in our social circle. But what made it truly absurd was Julian's expression. He looked visibly moved, nodding with practiced emotion as he stepped forward to take her hand. "Always," he declared into the open mic. Claire's ego was clearly floating on air. She even turned toward the rear of the hall, preparing to deliver a condescending consolation address to the absent bride, claiming she knew how deeply I cared for Julian, but that their bond was an unstoppable force of destiny, hoping I would find peace and forgive them. In the video clip, Julian was wearing a tailored charcoal suit paired with stark white, bulky running shoes that looked ridiculous against the formal backdrop. Claire held the microphone with total, triumphant composure, waiting for my shattered, tearful reaction. "Miss Vance," she called out into the hall, her voice amplified across the surround sound system. "Miss Vance, I hope you can understand." An uncomfortable, heavy silence settled over the room. Because the intended victim of their grand performance wasn't even in the building. "Miss Vance? Miss Vance?" Claire called out several times, her voice echoing through the massive hall, but received no answer. Finally, the chief event coordinator pushed open the grand double doors behind the altar. Beyond those doors lay a completely vacant foyer, with only my discarded bridal veil draped casually across a chair, signaling my complete absence. The entire hall exploded into chaos. The officiant stood frozen on stage, microphone trembling in hand. The young ring-bearer stared in absolute confusion at the empty doorway. Guests in the front rows turned their heads back and forth in disbelief, glancing between the abandoned veil and the stage where Julian stood, still holding Claire's hand. For 3 long seconds, nobody knew whether to laugh, gasp, or record a video. Then someone in the third row muttered loudly, "Holy hell. Did the bride run away first?" Another guest immediately added, "Look at his feet. Look at his shoes." The camera zoomed in tight. Julian's designer suit was immaculate from the waist up, but below his trousers, the thick white running shoes were impossible to ignore, comfortable, functional, and ready for a quick escape. On stage, Claire's face slowly began to transform. Her triumphant, villainous smile froze instantly, and the corners of her mouth started to twitch. She was still clutching the microphone like she had won a grand prize, but the victim she had carefully prepared to humiliate was nowhere to be found. Her grand speech had no target. Her emotional tears had no audience to wound. Her epic love declaration instantly morphed into a pathetic rehearsal performed in the wrong theater. My phone vibrated again in the airport lounge. Maya sent 3 frantic text messages in a row. Maya, girl. Congratulations. They hijacked an empty stage. Maya, he wore running shoes to escape, but forgot you had a passport and a brain. Maya, the mistress is still holding the mic like a customer service rep waiting for a manager. I covered my mouth, letting out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I should have felt pure heartbreak, and part of me did. 2 years was not a trivial amount of time. The man standing on that stage had once made the loud, chaotic world feel quiet for me. I had foolishly believed that silence meant I had finally found someone safe, someone who loved me enough that I didn't need to guard my heart. But as the video loop played again, watching Claire look frantically toward the empty doors, then toward the whispering crowd, and finally at Julian, my pain turned into cold clarity. Her thoughts had been so arrogant and sharp earlier, all about forcing me to watch her triumph. Now she looked like a criminal who had planned the perfect heist, only to discover the vault was already empty. I wiped the corner of my eye just once, taking a deep breath. Then I opened our official wedding guest group chat. Since Julian and Claire were so desperate for a spotlight, I decided to give them a final curtain call. Me, congratulations to the groom, the venue hijacker, and the running shoes. The moment the message dropped, the group chat fell dead silent. Within seconds, the unread notification counter began jumping like fireworks. I immediately sent a second, formal message to the wedding planner, both family patriarchs, and every primary client on the guest list. Me, the wedding is officially canceled. My engagement to Julian Sterling ends effective immediately. The Vance family hereby withdraws all commercial and financial cooperation related to this union. All remaining logistical matters will be settled through legal counsel. I wish Julian and Claire the exact same level of dignity they showed me today. None. Maya sent another short video clip. My message had clearly reached the venue. Someone must have read it out loud because the main hall erupted into outright laughter. A groom wearing sneakers to his own wedding, a mistress in a copycat bridal gown, an empty doorway, and a broadcast text from the bride who was already at the international terminal. On stage, Julian finally snapped out of his trance. He abruptly dropped Claire's hand and yanked his phone from his pocket. Ring. 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 I watched his name light up my screen. Julian Sterling. I declined the call. He called again instantly. I declined again, opened his profile, and blocked his number entirely. It was surprisingly effortless. For 2 years, I had answered his calls on the first ring because I believed every contact meant he valued me. Now I realize that sometimes a frantic phone call is just a coward trying to regain control after losing his audience. Back in the hall, Claire tried desperately to salvage the scene. She raised the microphone to her lips once more. Everyone, please don't misunderstand. I'm sure Miss Vance is just overwhelmed right now. I never intended to cause her pain. Julian and I simply hijacked her ceremony, a prominent investor called out from the second row, laughing openly. Another executive added coldly, she didn't even bother staying to listen to your speech. Smart woman. Claire's cheeks flushed a deep, embarrassed red. Julian's mother stood up from the front row, her face pale with pure rage. Julian's uncle, the senior partner who held the real authority in their architectural firm, strode purposefully toward the stage. Julian tried to step down to explain, but his uncle's voice cut through the sound system like a whip. Stay right where you are. The room instantly fell silent. Claire instinctively took a step behind Julian, as if the Sterling family name already belonged to her. Julian's uncle gave her a single, icy glance that made her flinch backward. Then he turned his gaze to Julian. You didn't prove love today, nephew. You proved to every investor in this room that you cannot be trusted with a multi-million-dollar firm, a marriage, or a microphone. Julian's face drained of all color. Uncle, please, I can explain. You wore athletic shoes underneath a custom suit to run away from your own wedding, his uncle interrupted coldly. You permitted an outsider to turn our family's reputation into a national laughingstock. What is there to explain? Claire quickly lowered her head, putting on a fragile, tearful expression. Mr. Sterling, I know this looks terrible, but Julian and I truly love each other. We were forced apart years ago. I only wanted to be brave for once. Julian's mother stepped up, reached out, and slapped the microphone directly out of Claire's hand. It hit the carpeted floor with a heavy, amplified thud. If this was your idea of an introduction into this family, Miss Claire, his mother said, her voice dripping with venom, you entered through the trash chute. The grand hall went dead silent. Claire's eyes filled with tears at once, pooling at the edges of her delicate makeup. In the past, that fragile, helpless expression might have made men rush to defend her. Not today. Today, she was standing on another woman's wedding stage, wearing a gown explicitly chosen to mimic the bride. There was no innocence left to sell. Maya's final video clip showed Julian being forcefully pulled toward the private back offices by his uncle, while Claire remained standing alone on the decorated platform, surrounded by thousands of imported white lilies that had not been arranged for her. I watched the screen until it went dark, letting out a long, quiet breath. Right on cue, the final boarding call echoed through the airport terminal speakers. I stood up, smoothed down my tailored jacket, picked up my carry-on bag, and walked toward the gate. Julian wore athletic shoes because he thought he would be the one making a dramatic exit. I wore heels to the international terminal and still left cleaner than he ever could. The plane took off just as the sun began to set. As the city grid dissolved into a sea of flickering lights beneath the clouds, I finally leaned back against the headrest and let my shoulders drop. Maya called me one last time before I switched my phone to airplane mode. I'm framing your group text, she declared proudly. Please don't, I chuckled weakly. Too late. I already took high-res screenshots and printed them in 3 different sizes. How are you holding up? I'm fine, I said softly. How bad is it over there? Bad for them. Absolute perfection for us. Your abandoned veil is currently trending on social media. My veil. The empty veil on the chair. People are calling it the most expensive resignation letter in corporate history. I closed my eyes, a faint smile touching my lips. That poor veil did nothing wrong. Neither did you, babe. Neither did you. For the first time in years, I couldn't hear any hidden motives or complex thoughts behind Maya's voice, just pure, unadulterated loyalty and warmth. The kind of clarity around Maya had never made me feel anxious or guarded. When my flight landed in Geneva early the next morning, my parents were already waiting outside the arrivals terminal. My mother wrapped her arms around me before I could even say hello, and my father quietly took my luggage without asking a single intrusive question. Neither of them said I had brought shame upon the family name. Neither of them asked why I didn't stay to protect our social standing. My father simply looked at my exhausted face, squeezed my shoulder, and said, "Good. You came home." That was the exact moment the tears finally came, not for Julian, but for the version of myself who had spent 2 years ignoring her own instincts, nearly walking down an aisle just to become an extra in someone else's dramatic play. Over the next 3 days, I slept deeply, ate home-cooked meals, ignored dozens of calls from unknown international numbers, and let our family lawyers manage the official legal paperwork. The scandal surrounding the ruined ceremony spread faster than any corporate merger announcement ever could. The tabloid headlines were brutal. Sneaker groom scandal. Architect flees empty stage. Mistress hijacks wedding, finds no bride. The runner-up bride, a declaration to an empty room. Claire tried to release a long, emotional statement on her social media account first. She wrote at length about raw courage, rekindled childhood love, deep regret, and how sometimes 2 souls meet the right person at the wrong time. The public commentary did not unfold the way she had anticipated. Wrong time? You literally picked the bride's time slot. The right person doesn't need to hijack a microphone to prove love. If it was true romance, why did it look like a cheap prank with ugly running shoes? Someone posted a high-resolution photo of Julian's bulky white running shoes sticking out beneath his formal suit trousers. That single image instantly became a viral meme, a symbol of a man dressed for commitment above the knees and escape below them. The Sterling family moved with ruthless corporate efficiency. They issued a brief, I see press release stating that the union had been canceled due to severe personal misconduct by Julian Sterling, and that the firm's board of directors would be reviewing his executive responsibilities. There was no mention of Claire. No blessing. No formal acceptance. Claire's family, the rival property developers, remained completely silent at first. Claire had likely been waiting, hoping the massive public scandal would finally force her father's legal wife to acknowledge her status. After all, if the entire city knew Julian had publicly chosen her, her family might have been backed into a corner to save face. But her stepmother was even colder than the Sterlings. A week later, at an industry gala, a journalist asked her about Claire's sudden return. She simply smiled for the cameras and replied, "Our family does not recognize a daughter who mistakes another woman's wedding ceremony for a theater audition." That single quote dominated the headlines by morning. Claire had failed to open the door to the Sterling dynasty, and in doing so, had permanently barred herself from her own family's wealth. All she had left was Julian, and Julian was no longer the powerful, rising executive he had been 48 hours prior. The Sterling firm's board stripped Julian of his authority over 2 major commercial developments, reassigning his primary accounts to his uncle. Every executive meeting that had once ended with clients trusting his architectural vision now began with someone asking, "Can we truly rely on his stability after what occurred?" No matter how influential a firm is, real estate relies heavily on trust and reputation. And Julian had proven, in front of hundreds of high-profile investors, that he was capable of turning a multi-million-dollar event into a personal circus simply because his former flame snapped her fingers. He began calling me from newly registered numbers. I declined every single one. He sent desperate messages through mutual acquaintances, which I deleted without reading. Eventually, he went to my former loft in the city, only to find it completely cleared out and staged for sale. Having nowhere else to turn, he cornered Maya at her outdoor equipment shop. She recounted the encounter to me later with immense satisfaction. "He looked like a hollow shell of a man," she said over a video call. "Like a ghost who realized he missed his own funeral." "What did you say to him?" I asked. "I told him, 'Julian, you plan to run away from your wedding.'" My best friend simply upgraded her travel arrangements. I laughed out loud for the first time in days. "And what did he do?" He stared at me with wide eyes and asked where you were. "And?" I told him to look up at the sky. "Maya." "What?" He actually looked up. My parents urged me to remain abroad for a while, and I readily agreed. There was no compelling reason to return right away. The engagement was dead, and legal representatives were already handling the remaining commercial ties, venue expenses, and joint investments between our families. For the next month, I built a quiet, fulfilling routine, morning walks through quiet streets, home-cooked meals, strategy meetings with my father's international team, and Maya's hilarious daily updates. Occasionally, late at night, the memory of Julian's thoughts from the tailor shop would resurface. "Claire is furious. I need to wear sneakers. I can finally be with Claire." It hurt less with each passing day. Not because the betrayal had magically shrunk, but because the man behind those cowardly thoughts looked smaller and smaller in my memory. 6 weeks later, I flew back briefly for the final legal settlement meeting. The Sterling family had formally requested it. My father offered to attend in my place, but I wanted to close this chapter face-to-face. Never again would I hide or handle my life through proxies. The meeting was held at a private corporate club rather than the Sterling family estate. Present were Julian, his parents, his uncle, 2 corporate attorneys, my family's legal counsel, Maya, and me. Claire came too. Uninvited, judging by the venomous look Julian's mother shot her when she slipped into the room. She wore a simple, subdued beige dress and sat beside Julian with her hands tightly folded in her lap. She looked noticeably thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. When our eyes met across the long conference table, her thoughts flooded my mind with sharp clarity. If she had just broken down crying at the altar like a normal person, everyone would have pitied Julian and me. Why did she just leave? Why does she look so completely unbothered? If Julian loses his position at the firm, what was the point of any of this? I almost smiled. There it was, not an ounce of tragic, grand romance, just pure, cold calculation wrapped in bruised ego. Julian stood up the moment I walked into the room. "Miss Vance, please." I walked smoothly to my seat without breaking stride. "Anything you are willing to display publicly, Julian, you can address right here in front of everyone." His face paled, and he slowly sat back down. Julian's uncle initiated the conversation with a formal, measured apology. He acknowledged the immense reputational damage caused to my family and confirmed that the Sterling firm would take full financial responsibility for all canceled contracts, event costs, and broken commercial partnerships. Throughout his uncle's speech, Julian kept staring at me, while Claire kept glancing anxiously at everyone who was looking at me. Finally, unable to contain her frustration, Claire spoke up. "Miss Vance, I know you despise me, but you ran away too. You can't put all the blame on Julian and me. If you had stayed and faced us properly like an adult, maybe things wouldn't have turned so ugly." I turned my head and looked directly into her eyes. "Don't flatter yourself, Claire. You didn't steal my groom. You simply delivered my cancellation notice." Maya made a muffled choking noise beside me. Julian's mother lowered her head, though I saw her shoulders shake once. Claire's lips trembled violently. "I know you think we humiliated you," Claire began again. "No, you tried to humiliate me," I interrupted calmly, leaning back in my chair. "I wasn't abandoned at my wedding. I simply resigned from a role that was already being played by an understudy." The room fell dead silent. Julian's hands clenched into tight fists on the table. "That's not fair." "Fair?" I looked down at his shoes. "Polished leather loafers today. A bit late for proper footwear, isn't it? Claire returned 2 months ago. Suddenly, you were overwhelmed with work. You lied about emergency site visits. She picked a gown to match mine. She prepared a dramatic speech. You prepared running shoes. When she took the microphone, you didn't hesitate for a single second. Which part of that situation did I misunderstand?" Claire's face turned bright red. Julian opened his mouth to defend himself, but no words came out. He couldn't deny what dozens of witnesses had watched him do. His uncle's expression darkened even further. My attorney pushed a thick leather folder across the polished table. "These are the Vance family's non-negotiable terms. Clean, definitive, and final. There were no petty revenge clauses or hidden traps, just a total, uncompromising severance." The engagement was formally dissolved, financial losses were settled, the Sterling family was legally barred from using my name or family reputation for public damage control, and all joint commercial ventures were systematically liquidated. The Sterling family patriarch signed without hesitation. Julian hesitated, his pen hovering over the paper. "Can we talk privately afterward?" "No," I replied instantly. "Please, just 5 minutes." His uncle slapped a heavy hand onto the desk. "Sign the document, Julian." Julian swallowed hard and scribbled his name. Claire stared at that signature as if watching her entire lavish future evaporate into thin air. After the formal signatures were recorded, Julian followed me out into the grand carpeted hallway. Maya instinctively tried to step between us, but I touched her forearm gently. "It's fine, Maya." Julian stopped 2 paces away. For the first time since this entire ordeal began, I didn't even need to look into his eyes to hear his thoughts echoing loud and clear. "If she just forgives me, the board will settle down. If she agrees to a joint statement, my uncle will restore my accounts. Claire is becoming a massive liability. Why does she look so breathtaking today? Why didn't I see her like this before?" A cold, heavy stillness settled in my chest, not because I was surprised, but because he was proving to be as predictable as ever. He looked at me with bloodshot, desperate eyes. I was confused, love. I made a terrible mistake. "No, Julian. You weren't confused," I said softly. "You were greedy. I thought I still loved Claire. And you proved it on stage." "I don't know anymore," his voice cracked. "I don't know what I want." "Then that is a matter between you and a therapist." He flinched as if I had struck him. "I never intended to break your heart. You literally wore running shoes to our wedding so you could flee with another woman." His eyes dropped to the floor. I thought if I didn't make a choice right then, I would lose her forever. And I was the woman you were completely comfortable humiliating in public. I can fix this, he pleaded, reaching out a hand before pulling it back. I heard his next thought a split second before he spoke. If she comes back, everything goes back to normal. Claire will give up. The board will forgive me. She always loved me, she'll soften. I let out a soft, humorless laugh. I don't need to read your mind to know you still don't care about me. Your mouth says sorry, but every bone in your body is just trying to manage corporate damage. His face drained of all color. What? Goodbye, Julian. I turned on my heel and walked toward the glass elevators. Behind me, Claire's shrill voice suddenly erupted in the hallway. Did you just ask her to take you back? Julian didn't answer. Answer me. You actually asked her to come back. Claire's tone turned hysterical. You need to stop making a scene, Julian. Me? Julian's bitter laugh echoed off the marble walls. I ruined my entire corporate standing for you. I ruined my wedding, my family won't even let you set foot in the main estate, and now you're screaming at me. Claire's internal monologue spiked sharp and frantic. If he can't make me part of this family, then what did I sacrifice my reputation for? I should have targeted someone with real power. I shouldn't have trusted a man who can't even stand up to his uncle. Julian heard only her silence. I heard her ruthless truth. A week later, the Sterling family hosted a closed-door executive mixer to reassure their primary shareholders. My father received a formal invitation and declined immediately. I chose to attend for one reason only: complete public closure. The gallery hall was smaller than our wedding venue, but half the guests in attendance had been present on that chaotic afternoon. They greeted me with a mixture of intense curiosity, profound respect, and the quiet awe given to a woman who refused to let herself be made into a victim. Julian stood near the main stage beside his uncle, looking visibly worn down. Claire was nowhere inside because she was currently standing outside the heavy glass entrance, arguing furiously with private security guards who refused to admit her. Her thoughts were so loud they resonated through the glass. They can't do this to me. Julian promised me. If I am kept outside, the whole social registry will know I was dumped. Everyone already knew. During the opening remarks, Julian's uncle stepped up to the podium and made a brief announcement. Julian Sterling will be stepping down from all primary account management to focus on internal structural advisory. An executive committee will oversee his former developments until full market confidence is restored. He didn't mention the wedding. He didn't have to. The quiet murmurs across the room spoke volumes. Julian stood there with a tight jaw, silently enduring the public demotion because he possessed no leverage left to fight it. Then his uncle added one final, decisive sentence. The Sterling firm maintains an absolute policy against personal misconduct that compromises corporate integrity. Outside the glass doors, Claire stopped arguing. The realization finally hit her. No executive lifestyle. No high society entry. No grand romance. Just a disgraced mistress locked out in a pale dress, while the man she had stolen lost the very power she had targeted him for. Later that night, Maya sent me a high-resolution photo someone had taken outside the venue. It showed Claire standing alone on the cold sidewalk, while Julian stood inside the warm, brightly lit hall, refusing to look in her direction. Maya's caption read, "Congratulations to the wedding hijacker. She successfully hijacked the pavement." I saved the photo. Julian and Claire's legendary romance lasted less than 6 weeks after that. Without a grand wedding to sabotage, a family legacy to defy, or an innocent bride to humiliate, the passion evaporated instantly. Their downfall played out publicly: leaked restaurant arguments, mutual acquaintances taking sides, and eventually a viral clip of Claire throwing a glass of ice water in Julian's face outside a dining club, shouting that she hadn't returned from abroad to be hidden in the shadows. The public commentary was merciless. She stole a groom and didn't even get a ring. He wore sneakers for true love and ended up walking home alone. Empty stage update. Still no wedding, still no dignity. By then, I had completely stopped following the news. My life had moved forward into a bright, peaceful chapter. I immersed myself in expanding my father's European trade initiatives. I learned to enjoy early morning walks along quiet cobblestone streets, reading in sunny cafes, and waking up without that lingering doubt in the back of my mind asking if someone was deceiving me. Most importantly, I learned to truly value peaceful silence again. For a long time after Julian, total silence from a person made me deeply guarded. With him, I had foolishly assumed that a quiet mind meant pure, untainted love simply because I couldn't hear his thoughts. In reality, he had only been quiet until my place in his heart became empty enough for another woman's name to echo inside it. Over time, that residual anxiety faded. A senior project manager working with my father's firm began joining our strategy meetings. He was grounded, respectful, and direct. He never offered empty compliments or turned my past into a dramatic conversation topic. When our eyes met during our early meetings, I could hear small, ordinary thoughts. She looks tired today. She is much sharper than the press implied. Don't bring up the wedding scandal unless she explicitly mentions it first. There was no hidden agenda in those thoughts, only genuine respect. That transparency was wonderfully comforting. As months passed, those internal whispers grew quieter, not vanishing out of deceit, but softening naturally, like distant footsteps fading away. One evening, after a long negotiation session, he handed me a warm cup of herbal tea and stepped back to give me space. I looked into his eyes and heard absolutely nothing. For a split second, my chest tightened with old instinct. But then I looked at his calm, steady expression and realized I wasn't afraid. For the first time in my life, complete silence didn't feel like a hidden lie. It felt like safety. I didn't rush to label it or demand guarantees. I simply accepted the cup, smiled, and said, "Thank you." That was more than enough. In late autumn, Julian unexpectedly arrived in the city. Maya had sent a fair warning hours prior. The running shoe groom has landed overseas. Hide your athletic footwear. He waited outside my family's administrative building as dusk fell. He looked noticeably thinner, his tailored coat hung loosely on his frame, and his eyes carried a heavy, permanent fatigue. No Claire, no legal representatives, no security, just Julian, late as always. "Miss Vance," he called out softly as I stepped onto the plaza. I stopped a few steps away, keeping my hands resting comfortably in my coat pockets. "I won't give you much of my time, Julian. You already gave me 2 years," he said, lowering his head. "I deserve every bit of your coldness." I remained quiet. His internal monologue reached my ears, softer now, but still distinct. "She looks so peaceful. I destroyed everything for nothing. If I had married her, my family would still trust me. I miss the way she used to look at me before Claire came back. Was that real love? I don't even know anymore." Even now, his regret was hopelessly tangled with self-pity, corporate loss, and vanity. He looked up, his voice cracking. I thought you would wait for me to fix things." I looked at him, feeling a sudden, quiet wave of pity, not the kind that softens a heart, but the kind reserved for someone who continuously ruins their own life. "You wore running shoes to our wedding because you thought you would be the one making a dramatic exit, Julian." I wore a boarding pass. Pain flashed across his features. I was wrong. I was so foolishly wrong. "Yes," I agreed calmly. "You were." "I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness," he stammered, taking a small step forward before stopping himself. I just need to know one thing. Did you ever truly love me?" For 2 long years, I had genuinely believed I did. But standing beneath the crisp autumn air, looking at the man who had planned to abandon me on a public stage, the truth was startlingly simple. "I loved the silence," I answered honestly. "Because I mistook your lack of noise for devotion. Now I know that real peace sounds completely different." Julian closed his eyes, a tear cutting through the dust on his cheek. "Is there truly no chance for us?" "None. Even if Claire had never returned, you would have eventually traded me for another shadow the moment things got quiet." He had no rebuttal. That was the unvarnished truth. I turned and walked toward my car. "Miss Vance," he called out one last time. I paused, looking back over my shoulder. He stood alone under the gray sky, the man who had prepared sneakers to run away first, only to become the one permanently left behind. "I am truly sorry," he whispered. I know, I said quietly. I didn't say goodbye. Some doors don't require a dramatic slam, they simply need to remain locked. A full year after the wedding that never happened, Maya flew over to visit. She unpacked her luggage and dramatically presented me with a polished, mahogany picture frame. Inside was a crisp, high-definition printout of the empty wedding venue doors, the discarded bridal veil resting on the chair, and Julian in the background, his white running shoes clearly visible. I stared at it in disbelief. Maya, what? It's a historical artifact, she declared proudly. I am not hanging this in my living room. Fine. What about the guest bathroom? I burst out laughing until my sides ached. Later that evening, we sat on the balcony sipping wine, watching the city lights stretch toward the horizon. Maya leaned back against her chair, her eyes reflecting the warm glow of the lanterns. Are you truly happy now? She asked gently. I looked out at the peaceful skyline. The question didn't trigger any old pain or hesitation. Yes, I answered softly. I really am. Julian lost his bride, his grand wedding, his standing in the firm, and the romantic narrative he had tried to stage. Claire lost the Sterling family, her social standing, public sympathy, and the executive lifestyle she had tried so hard to claim. The Sterling firm recovered, but they never again handed Julian sole authority over a major project without strict oversight. His name remained tied to the scandal far longer than any architectural accomplishment. As for me, I never revealed my perceptual gift to anyone. I never needed to. People always reveal their true nature long before magic is required. They wanted to turn my wedding into a stage for their shallow drama. So I left them the stage, reclaimed my dignity, and let them perform their farce to an empty room. I used to believe that silence meant love because I couldn't hear Julian's thoughts. Now I know better. Real love is not the silence of a man hiding a betrayal. Real love is the quiet peace of never needing to read his mind at all.